Bonjour, I'm so glad that so many of you could join me today. My name is John James Audubon, and I would like to begin this tour with plate number 1. This was the first bird that I drew, the wild turkey, and arguably my favorite bird. Truly one of the largest birds in North America and unique to the Americas. I never saw anyone quite like it in Europe. You can see how large this bird is. Because of the size of this bird, I chose an extra large paper called Double Elephant Portfolio. Double elephant because it is twice as large as the largest sheet. But it was necessary for such a grand bird. You can see this male turkey wandering along the shore of the river with the wild cane, a relative of the bamboo, a native bamboo that grows along the Ohio River. I recall seeing great flocks of them as they flew across the Ohio. Truly one of the grandest birds in America. If you look quite closely, you can see the effervescence of the feather, the iridescence of the feather. In each of my portraits, I try to tell the story of the life of the bird. The difference between the male and the female, their habitats and where they live, their favorite foods. And I do believe the yellow-billed cuckoo is a perfect example. Let me ask you, what is the cuckoo eating?
A butterfly.
A swallow-tailed butterfly. Now I ask you to look very closely here at the leaf, and you can see tiny black specks, the eggs of the tiger swallowtail butterfly. It only lays its eggs on a member of the pawpaw family. And so this is a pawpaw tree in fruit. Now, I did not paint the eggs or the caterpillars, but look more closely. What do you see here? The leaves have been eaten by the caterpillar. Now, knowing that the swallowtail only lays its eggs on a member of the pawpaw family, and you can see that the eggs have hatched and the caterpillar has eaten this leaf, and somewhere it has transformed itself into a chrysalis, which has metamorphosized into the adult butterfly. Here you not only have the story of the bird, of the insect, but you also have the relationship, the food web of the forest, all captured in one exquisite painting of the yellow-billed cuckoo. This is arguably one of the more controversial images that I painted. If you look closely, you can see a rattlesnake attempting to devour a northern mockingbird. Now, when this portrait was first shown in Philadelphia, some members of the Philosophical Society, founded by Thomas Jefferson, attacked this painting, saying that a rattlesnake would never climb a tree. But I challenge you to look more closely. You will see that this is a flowering jasmine which grows in small shrubs. And it is believable that a rattlesnake would climb into a small shrub to attack a nest. Snakes are known to raid nests, to swallow the eggs, to eat the young. And it is also true that often when you see a snake attacking a nest, the mother bird will call out, and other birds of other species will come to its aid. And so it is very believable that several mockingbirds would attack this snake in an attempt to rescue the young of one of its comrades. So we have 3 members of the same family of birds. And what family might that be?
Woodpeckers.
They're all woodpeckers. And I would challenge you to look more closely at these 3 different species of woodpeckers. What are some of the differences that you see between them? What are the obvious differences? And can you be more specific when you say size?
Some are larger than others.
Some are larger than others. And color?
The color very bright in some areas.
The size of the bill.
The size of the bill is also very important.
Tail fan.
The tail fan, yes. Now, what are some of the things that all 3 of these birds have in common?
Stripes.
The color patterns, though the colors are different, the patterns are very similar.
Their food source maybe?
They're all woodpeckers. We know this, and so they peck wood looking for
Worms and insects?
for insects and grubs and beetles. What else do you know?
The climbing style feet.
Yes, if you look very closely, you will see that they have opposing toes. That their lower 2 toes oppose the top 2 to give them additional stability as they're hanging onto the bark of the tree. And if you look more closely still, you mentioned the fan of the tail. All of them have a pointed tail. And this pointed tail is used to help them cling onto the tree. Kind of like a tripod, their opposing toes give them additional strength, and then their tail stuck into the bark allows them to hold on quite firmly while they bang their head against the tree. And one thing you cannot see, but I discovered in my dissection of the woodpecker, their brains float. And like a shock absorber, they can bang their head against a tree all day long without getting a headache. I would not recommend that you try this at home.
As an artist, you were able to see so much more than someone who was just passing through. So as a scientist and as an artist, you took the time to focus.
Merci.
Many, many things that we are not seeing today.
Well, in part because I spent literally thousands of days in the forest of America, thousands upon hundreds of thousands of hours, often dozens of days studying a single bird and learning its nature. Every bird that I painted, I wrote their biography, the ornithological biography, published in 5 volumes, which they do have one of the volumes on display, and we'll talk more about it later. So in each of my portraits, I try to capture the drama, the art of the bird, as well as something scientifically accurate. And so thank you for noticing this. And since you mentioned the art, let us wander over here where you can see how the art was made. Now, since several of you have asked about the process in which the art was made, let me share with you. I would first go into the wild. All of the birds, if you look at the fine print, were drawn from nature by John James Audubon. After, I would make my original study, working mostly in watercolor, though occasionally I would use pastels to create, say, the iridescence of a ruby-throated hummingbird, or the glimmer of a wild cock turkey. After I would make my original drawings, these were taken first to Edinburgh, where a man by the name of Lazars made copper engravings. He looked at the depth and breadth of this project and knew that he would not survive. And so he recommended that I go to London. He encouraged me to hire Robert Havell. But Robert Havell's son, Robert Havell Jr., arguably was the best engraver of our day. He would take my original image and make an exact opposite in a copper plate. The copper was smeared with wax. He would engrave into the wax. He would use acid to etch into the wax to create some of the subtlety of the shading of the leaves. Then that copper plate would be smeared with ink, pressed upon a specially ordered paper, the double elephant portfolio made in England at the Watman Mills, which later made the Confederate money and made the personal stationery of the Queen. The Watman Mills used a high rag content paper. You've heard of the rag and bone man? He would go through the village collecting rags and bones, and they would be ground into paper. The double elephant-sized paper would be pressed with a copper plate, and if you look very carefully, you will see the plate mark. And that is one way that you know it is an original Audubon engraved by Havell. You also, if you hold it up to the light, you will also see the Watman watermark in the paper. Now, these original images were then hand-colored. So you might add the blue, and then you would hand it to her, and she would add the red, and then you would hand it to her, and you would add the green. And yes, a team of women did the coloring. And sometimes in a portfolio, you would find the lunch meat of their sandwich pressed between the paper. And occasionally, because the coloring, if not done well enough to my standards, I would take it back to Havell and insist that they color it again. But Havell's artistry comes through. If you look very closely at the shading of this one leaf from a tulip poplar, and then look here, when it was handed to you, you would wash that leaf with green. But because of the engraving and the shading that was already done, you would see the curl in the leaf, the contrast of light and dark green, all of that captured in the engraver's art.